God damn it, it is what it is. Yeah. Oh, you ain't want to be in the I'm a slide out. Yeah. Coming soon. Yep. You see you big stalker? Yeah.
You know, I can tell you that I did speak with a few people, but there were messages upon messages online pouring out of love and memories and thank yous of Michael Brown, who owns Sloppy Chops behind me. They're getting the message of his death rocking the community all throughout Detroit. Let's take a good look at him because he is beloved and missed by so many. This is Michael Brown, also known as Mike B. That's what many people called him, both in his restaurants and outside the restaurants. He was known for Sloppy Chops and Sloppy Crab. Those were his establishments, his places, and many say that the food was good, but it was his heart. That's what stood out the most. Detroit police say 3 people were shot at 4:30 in the morning on Saturday on Pilgrim Street and Schaefer Highway. Mike B, again, as many people called him, died of his injuries. Messages, as I said, have been pouring in since it all happened, saying he was a great father, great husband, and overall mountain of a man.
Very well loved, respected. He was an asset to our community. He fed us good. He even went past food to do community service and to help community organizations and people. No one could be hungry around him, could be in need around him.
He stood up and supported the community, specifically around hunger. He always did things to make sure that people had food, that he would say that there's no young person that's going to be hungry as long as I'm around. So he would do things. And then I remember either it was last year or the year before last that there was a tragic thing that happened at one of his restaurants, and he was just there 10 toes down for that person and that family and that community.
So many people posting, sharing memories just like you heard there. Now, police tell us that they are looking for the suspects, and they're asking anyone with tips and information to please reach out to them as soon as possible. Call 1-800-SPEAK-UP. It is all anonymous. Reporting live here in Detroit, Lauren Edwards, Fox 2 News.
Yeah, Lauren, do we know much about this investigation? We know that there were 3 people hurt and are shot, rather. Do we know if he was an intended target in all of this and why?
And that's a question we're all asking at this time. The investigation is very early in its stages. I reached out to DPD asking just for an update. And again, all they could tell me is that the investigation is ongoing. But again, if anyone knows anything, please let the police know.
It was still dark over the city of Detroit. Most people were asleep. The streets were quiet. And the long night of partying was finally coming to an end. But outside a bar on Detroit's west side, something suddenly went terribly wrong. Just after 4:30 in the morning, gunfire erupted in front of a late-night spot on Schaefer Highway. In a matter of seconds, chaos filled the street. People ran for cover. Others froze in shock. When the shooting stopped, 3 people had been hit. 2 victims were found near the front of the bar. The third was lying across the street. That man was Michael Brown, popularly known as Mike B., a well-known Detroit businessman, restaurant owner, and a familiar face in the city's nightlife scene. Only hours earlier, he had been alive, laughing, and moving through the same community where he built his name. By sunrise, Detroit would wake up to the news that one of its most recognizable restaurateurs had been killed, and the mystery of who pulled the trigger and why had just begun. As the first reports began spreading across Detroit that morning, many people couldn't believe what they were hearing. Michael Brown, a man known throughout the city's restaurant and nightlife scene, had been killed in a shooting outside a bar on the west side. For years, Brown had built a reputation as an energetic entrepreneur who helped create some of Detroit's most talked-about dining spots. His restaurants drew large crowds, especially on weekends, when people came not just for the food, but for the lively atmosphere he was known for. Now, the same community that had supported his businesses was left trying to process a sudden and violent loss. Friends, customers, and fellow business owners began sharing their shock online. Many described him as someone who loved the city and invested his time and energy into building places where people could gather, celebrate, and enjoy themselves. But in the early hours of that morning, the man behind those busy restaurants had become the victim of a tragedy that no one saw coming. And as investigators began piecing together what happened outside that bar, the city was left asking a painful question. How did a night out end in deadly gunfire? Welcome to True Crime Diaries, where we uncover shocking crimes and hidden details behind real cases. Subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories. These are real lives and real tragedies, lessons we can't ignore. Let's dive in. Before his name appeared in crime headlines, Mike B. was known across Detroit as a man who built his life around business, community, and bringing people together. Michael Brown grew up in the Detroit area and attended Southfield Lathrop High School, where he played basketball and later earned a college scholarship to continue the sport. In his younger years, he worked different jobs, including time on an assembly line at a Chrysler plant, before eventually deciding he wanted to create opportunities for himself instead of working for someone else. Friends and family say Brown always had an entrepreneurial spirit. Long before he owned restaurants, he made a name for himself in Detroit's nightlife scene as a party promoter and event organizer. For years, he helped organize events, promote hip-hop showcases, and manage entertainment venues around the city. Those experiences introduced him to thousands of people and helped him build a wide network across Detroit's music, club, and business communities. Eventually, Brown began turning that reputation into something bigger. He moved from promoting parties to running venues and supporting local artists who performed at weekly showcases. Many people who worked with him during that time say he gave young entertainers and promoters their first chance to succeed. His clubs became gathering spots where musicians, DJs, and fans could connect. After decades in nightlife, Brown shifted his focus to the restaurant business. By the mid-2020s, Brown had become one of Detroit's most recognizable restaurant owners. Many people described him as a community builder who used his businesses to create jobs and bring people together. Outside of work, Brown was also deeply devoted to his family. He was a husband and the father of 5 children, and relatives say he often encouraged younger people around him to stay focused, pursue their goals, and build something of their own. To those who knew him personally, Mike B. wasn't just a businessman. He was someone who loved Detroit and believed in investing his time, energy, and money back into the city that helped shape him. And for years, that belief helped turn his name into something many people in the city recognized, not just as a restaurant owner, but as a figure woven into Detroit's culture and nightlife. As Michael Brown stepped into the restaurant world, he didn't just open a single place to eat. He began building a brand that many Detroit residents would soon recognize. The restaurant focused on bold, hearty meals, thick steaks, ribeyes, and tomahawk cuts that reflected the city's love for big flavors. But what quickly made the restaurant famous were its lamb chop specials, which became one of the most talked about menu items among local diners. Customers didn't just come for dinner. They came for the atmosphere. Inside Sloppy Chops, the mood often felt closer to a lively gathering than a quiet restaurant. Music played, friends met up after work, and the place developed a loyal following of people who enjoyed the mix of food and nightlife energy.
Good day, foodies. Today, our food journey takes us to Sloppy Chops. Sloppy Chops is located in Detroit, Michigan. Sloppy Chops is expanding and will be having another location in downtown Detroit as well. We love the Sloppy Chops menu. They offer a happy hour during the week, and they have a vast array of things like steak, salmon, pasta dishes, all of our favorites. We decided to go with the happy hour shrimp and the steak bite appetizer. For our main entrees, we went with the sloppy chops, which are lamb chops. They were made to perfection. The sauteed potatoes are so freaking delicious, smothered in cheese. And we went with the macaroni stuffed with fresh lobster and shrimp. Every dish is always so flavorful and delicious. Go over there and give them a try.
I was due for a girls' night, so me and the girls headed to Sloppy Chop. There go my girl Kennedy waiting on us at the bar, and you already know we had to find us some food on the menu. They had great picks. I had to go and check on the chef, make sure he was cooking it up, okay? We was having us a ball. We did us some shots. We had us a good little time, got ready to eat some food. And when I tell y'all, the food was so good. Like, let's get into it. Them steak bites were tea. Mac and cheese never miss. Yeah. But we had us a great little time, had us a nightcap, and baby, that was all I needed to top the rest of my night off. Make sure y'all check out Sloppy Chops. You will not be disappointed.
Encouraged by the early success, Brown decided to expand. In 2021, he opened Sloppy Crab, a seafood restaurant located on East Jefferson Avenue, near Detroit's riverfront and across from the Renaissance Center. This second location brought a completely different flavor to the brand. While Sloppy Chops focused on steaks and chops, Sloppy Crab highlighted seafood dishes such as crab boils, shrimp, lobster mac and cheese, and fish plates prepared with rich sauces and spices. The restaurant itself was designed to feel modern and social. Guests could sit inside a stylish dining room, enjoy cocktails at a large marble bar, or head upstairs to a rooftop patio overlooking downtown Detroit. But what truly set Sloppy Crab apart was the atmosphere Brown created. Drawing on his years in the entertainment world, he blended dining with nightlife. The restaurant sometimes featured music, strong cocktails, and occasional celebrity appearances, turning the space into one of the city's liveliest gathering spots. For many Detroit residents, the Sloppy brand became more than just two restaurants. It represented a new wave of Black-owned businesses helping reshape the city's dining culture, offering places where people could eat, socialize, and celebrate Detroit's local energy. And as the brand grew, so did Mike B's reputation. He was no longer just a nightlife promoter or club figure. He had become one of the city's most recognizable restaurant entrepreneurs, a man whose name was now tied to some of Detroit's busiest dining rooms. But while the business appeared to be moving forward, the night that would change everything was already approaching. Away from the busy restaurant floors and late-night crowds, Michael Brown lived a life centered around family and personal relationships. Those closest to him say he took great pride in being a father of 5 children, and he often spoke about wanting to build something meaningful that his family could be proud of. Friends describe him as someone who stayed connected to the people around him. Even as his businesses became more popular, he regularly checked in on longtime friends, supported people trying to start their own ventures, and tried to encourage younger people to stay focused on their goals. Family members say Brown believed strongly in helping others succeed, whether it was offering advice, providing job opportunities at his restaurants, or introducing people to new business connections. He often tried to open doors for those around him. People who knew him personally also remember his personality. He was known for being outgoing, confident, and someone who could easily start a conversation with almost anyone. In crowded rooms, he was often the person greeting guests, shaking hands, and making sure people felt welcome. To many in Detroit's social circles, Mike B was not just a businessman. He was a familiar presence, someone who had spent decades building relationships across the city. And that made the events that would soon follow even harder for those close to him to accept. The early hours of February 28th, 2026, began like many other weekends in Detroit. People had spent the night out enjoying music, drinks, and conversation. Some were still gathered outside Suite 100 Bar and Venue, a late-night spot located on Schaefer Highway on Detroit's west side. The crowd was beginning to thin as the night slowly moved toward morning. Then, without warning, the calm of the street was broken. Around 4:30 a.m., gunfire suddenly rang out near the front of the bar. In seconds, what had been a normal night turned into a scene of panic. People scattered, trying to get away from the sound of shots. When police officers arrived, they discovered that 3 people had been struck by bullets during the shooting. 2 victims were located near the entrance of the building, while another person had collapsed across the street. That third victim was Michael Brown. Emergency responders rushed to help him, but his injuries were severe. Not long afterward, the 52-year-old businessman was pronounced dead. The other 2 victims survived the shooting, though their identities were not immediately released. Investigators quickly secured the area, blocking off parts of the street as they began collecting evidence and speaking with witnesses. Detectives tried to piece together what had happened in those chaotic moments before the gunfire stopped, but many details remained unclear. Police confirmed the shooting took place outside the bar, yet they had not publicly identified a suspect or announced any arrests. Authorities urged anyone who might have seen something or recorded video on a phone to come forward with information that could help solve the case. As the sun began to rise over Detroit that morning, the scene outside Suite 100 told a tragic story. What had started as another night in the city's nightlife scene had ended with one man dead, 2 others wounded, and a community struggling to understand how such violence could happen so suddenly. As news of the shooting spread across Detroit, the reaction was immediate and emotional. Many people woke up that morning to messages and social media posts sharing the same heartbreaking headline. Michael Brown had been killed. For a city that had watched his businesses grow over the years, the loss felt deeply personal. Customers who had visited his restaurants, friends who had known him for decades, and fellow entrepreneurs began posting tributes online. Many described him as someone who brought energy into every room he walked into. Others remembered how he created spaces where people could relax, enjoy good food, and feel connected to their community. Outside his restaurants, the atmosphere quickly changed. Places that had once been filled with music and conversation were now surrounded by sadness. Supporters gathered to remember him, and messages of sympathy continued pouring in from across the city. Family members also spoke publicly about the loss. Those closest to Brown said the tragedy had left them shocked and heartbroken. They remembered him as someone who worked hard to provide for his children and who believed strongly in helping people around him move forward in life. His brother later made an emotional appeal, asking anyone who might know something about the shooting to step forward and help investigators find answers. According to him, the family simply wanted justice and a clear understanding of what had taken their loved one's life.
7 News Detroit reporter Randy Wembley is listening to Brown's brother and also hearing concerns about how late some bars are staying open.
A Suite 100 bar and venue closed after Mikey Brown, a beloved restaurant owner, was gunned down right outside of it. 2 others also injured in that shooting. Now renewed calls to regulate after-hours businesses in residential neighborhoods. This as the Brown family mourns and pleads for justice.
My brother took care of a lot of people. He provided a lot of jobs. Now I just ask that you guys help him out this one time and speak up.
Myron Brown is still coming to terms with the murder of his older brother, known to many throughout Detroit as Mike B. More than a successful club and restaurant owner, Myron says his brother was a devoted husband and father, and to him, a true father figure.
Our father passed when I was 1 year old. He was 5 years old. And my oldest brother was 10 years old. He taught me how to play basketball. He was always on me about my grades and my behavior.
Mikey Brown was gunned down outside Suite 100 on the city's west side around 4 a.m. last Saturday. 2 others were also injured in that shooting. Detroit police and Crime Stoppers urging the public to help them develop leads in the case.
Come forward, speak up, say something.
And over the last 6 years, we've taken in 42,000 anonymous tips, and not one of those tipsters has ever been identified.
Brown's murder struck a nerve in Detroit. Tributes for him flooded social media. His death reigniting calls for Detroit to rethink how late businesses can operate in residential areas.
When we get like a lot of our stats back, and most of the crime and violence happens, late night.
Isaiah Zeke Williams from the Community Violence Intervention Group New Era Detroit addressed City Council on Tuesday. He says the discussion is not about targeting businesses, but about protecting neighborhoods. Councilwoman Angela Whitfield Calloway plans to take up the issue and says an enforcement crackdown is on the way.
Within days, plans were being made for memorial services, and people from many different parts of Detroit's business and nightlife communities prepare to say goodbye. For those who knew him, the silence left behind felt heavy. The man who once spent his nights welcoming guests and building businesses was suddenly gone, and the city he loved was now mourning one of its most recognizable figures. In the days following the shooting, detectives with the Detroit Police Department began working to understand exactly what led to the deadly violence. Investigators returned to the area around Suite 100 Bar and Venue, carefully examining the scene and collecting any evidence that might explain what happened during those early morning moments. Officers searched for surveillance footage from nearby businesses and spoke with people who had been present that night. Witnesses were especially important in this case. Police believed that several people had been outside the bar when the shooting occurred, and some may have seen the events that unfolded just before the gunfire started. Authorities confirmed that 3 individuals were struck during the incident, with Brown being the only victim who did not survive. The 2 other injured victims were taken to the hospital and treated for their wounds. At the same time, Detectives worked to determine whether the attack had been directed at someone specific or if the violence had escalated suddenly during a confrontation. Investigators did not immediately release details about possible suspects, but they urged anyone who might have video recordings, photos, or other information from that night to contact the police. Even small pieces of information, they explained, could help them understand what led to the shooting. For Brown's family, the investigation represented hope. Hope that the truth about what happened outside the bar would eventually come to light. But for now, the case remained open, and many questions were still waiting to be answered. Even as investigators continue reviewing evidence and speaking with witnesses, one major question still remains at the center of this case. Was Michael Brown the intended target? Or was he caught in the middle of a dispute that turned deadly? Police have not publicly confirmed whether the shooting was planned or if it happened after a confrontation outside the bar. Another key question is whether arguments, personal conflicts, or business-related issues played any role in what happened that morning. At this stage, investigators have not officially linked the violence to Brown's restaurant operations or to any confirmed dispute. There is also uncertainty about who opened fire and whether more than one person was involved. Law enforcement has asked the public to come forward with surveillance footage, dashcam videos, or cell phone recordings that might provide clarity. In cases like this, video evidence often becomes crucial in helping detectives reconstruct the sequence of events. For Brown's family and supporters, the biggest concern goes beyond legal details. They want accountability and justice. Community members have continued to call for anyone with information to speak up so the truth behind the shooting can be uncovered. Until arrests are made or more official updates are released, many questions surrounding the case remain unanswered. And in the meantime, Detroit is left remembering a business owner whose life ended suddenly, while waiting for the facts that may eventually explain how the tragedy unfolded. Michael Brown's story is one that reflects both success and sudden loss. His passing left behind a wife, 5 children, family members, loyal customers, and business partners who are now carrying forward his memory. Many people continue to honor him by sharing stories about the impact he had on their lives and the opportunities he created for others. Today, his restaurants stand as part of the legacy he built, reminders of the ambition and determination he showed throughout his career. As investigators continue working to bring clarity to what happened, the community still hopes for answers and accountability. Mike B's life shows how deeply one person can influence a city. And even though his life ended in tragedy, the mark he left on Detroit, through business, family, and relationships, remains. Even after the public attention surrounding the shooting, the case remains important to follow as investigators continue their work. Law enforcement often relies on community cooperation, anonymous tips, and video evidence to move cases forward when immediate arrests are not made. For Brown's family and supporters, updates on the investigation remain closely watched. Many people continue to check local news reports and official police statements to see if new developments, such as identified suspects, arrests, or court proceedings, are announced. If arrests are made in the future, the case would likely move into the legal process, where charges are filed and court hearings begin. That stage could bring more clarity about what happened and who may be held responsible. Until then, the situation remains an open case, and one that the community continues to follow closely for answers and justice. That's a wrap on today's case. But the story doesn't end here. There are still countless voices unheard, stories hidden in the shadows, and truths waiting to be uncovered. Here at True Crime Diaries, we're committed to digging deeper, sharing the facts, honoring the victims, and keeping their memories alive. If you found this story meaningful, hit subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications so you're always among the first to see when a new case is released. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.